Hi, I'm Bruce Bolger. I'm founder of the Enterprise Engagement Alliance, an organization committed to helping organizations achieve their goals through a proactive and strategic approach to people management. And our EEA Zoom show series features experts in all areas of engagement who have been very generous with their time to share their wisdom with business management that has to make decisions related to all the areas of engagement. And today we're focusing on ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and the field of engagement, which is a convergence that I personally believe is creating a big opportunity. But we're going to find out more. And first, I'm happy to introduce Dawn Conway. She's CEO at Boost Engagement, and you're going to see her in a second in full screen. And her company is the first to publish a corporate sustainability report, which for which I give her credit. I should say, in this industry of engagement suppliers, I don't think anybody else does. Brian Galonek, he's president of All Star Incentive Marketing, a 50-year-old company with which he's been involved for 30 years. That has, I think, the first in the industry that's really begun to market ESG as a business solution for his clients. We're going to talk to him more about that. And then we have Rob Purdy. He's CEO and founder of CarltoneOne Engagement, and they've just released their Evergrow software platform, their employee engagement platform that addresses both the E, the environmental of ESG, and the S. So we're really here to talk about how ESG can help organizations be more profitable and successful, and to help solution providers create new business opportunities. And before we get started here, I just want to always thank the sponsors of the Enterprise Engagement Alliance that have made a commitment to sharing the wisdom of achieving goals through people through our multiple education and learning solutions. So moving on, I'm going to stop the share. And I'm going to start with you, Dawn. You were the first in the industry, as I said, to publish a corporate sustainability report. Why?
It probably has some to do with my background in terms of running corporate responsibility globally for a very large organization before joining Boost 5 years ago. And I saw the benefits of you can do well by doing good. And by measuring whether it's environment, your culture, your people, your suppliers, your customers, all of it just is so important that you don't have to be a publicly held company to do this. A privately held company can do it. So just because there may be some, and the company that I work for happened to be a UK company, which has more strict, when you're a public company, of what you have to do in terms of regulation and what you have to report, that why not in a privately held company do this? It's the right thing to do. And
So
so
are you really saying that it's not just though corporate social responsibility, it's better business?
it's better business. It's better business. And as as part of a community, we should be reflecting what are we doing to impact the environment, to utilizing our people in giving back to the community, measuring, and we measure. I mean, we measure what we're doing as far as our sustainability objectives. We have specific KPIs that we have every year. And this is our third year in doing this. And interestingly enough, we're getting more and more of our customers are asking to see our corporate social responsibility report. And it has really been a key differentiator for us. And we did not do this as a marketing. We did this because it is the right thing to do.
Brian, you made a decision, it seems, from following you folks on social media, that this is going to become a part of your story as positioning yourself as a full service incentive company. What's the fit? What's the tie-in between that and ESG?
Well, there's great overlap, right? I mean, so if you just look at our tagline as a company, we primarily focus on employee engagement as a path towards something else, right? Safety, wellness, health, what have you, sales. So our tagline is in helping companies engage, motivate, and reward the people behind their success, and focus on the word people for a second, and then overlay that with the four pillars of ESG, right? Governance, planet, people, and prosperity. There would obviously be connections. Then if you drill down on the ESG metrics, and you start reading them one by one, we're not a direct match for all of them, but for a number of them, I mean, one of them, safety and health. So one of the ESG metrics is how careful are you in keeping your employees and pedestrians and others safe on the job. One of them's training. One of the things is about turnover, right? One of the metrics under ESG is about turnover, which is to say that if you have high turnover, you're probably not taking care of your people the way you should. And it's a win-win-win, right? So when we talk about employee engagement and what companies need to do to have a more engaged workforce, certainly it's better for the employees. It's absolutely better for the company itself, and it's better for the planet. R&D, value creation, reporting purposes, right? All of those different things that they're in the ESG metrics, many of those things, I should say, overlap directly with employee engagement and the ROI that comes from it. And so it seemed like a natural extension of what we talk about to begin with.
Well, Rob, I've known you for many years, and you built the environment, into all of your technologies it would seem to me to be almost a personal passion. That this is something that you weren't worried about the ROI. But now you've introduced a technology that will enable companies to actually look at the ROI. So explain how you have built the environmental, and the S of social into your enterprise engagement technologies.
Yeah, sure. So the branding that we created is called Evergrow. We spent a long time developing a concept that was actually had several names prior, and we shifted oars when we asked ourselves the hard question: what's really going to create emotional engagement? Because when we look at what moves the needle inside an organization, it's always the people. It's always getting them really engaged in what they're doing, making the work in our world mean more. And that's our sort of tagline again for Evergrow is we want to make work mean more. And when we looked at that tagline and we looked at the products that even we've built historically, we felt we were missing true meaning behind the product itself. So technology can take us so far, but it has a limit. Emotional engagement has to take over. And I think when you get to that point of realization where you want to create that differentiation around how we motivate people, that moves into the emotional side. And when we moved into emotional, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been extremely involved over the years in a lot of sustainability type projects, marsh protection programs, and again, just removing plastic out of the environment. But what we landed on initially was trying to drive something that we could use commonly around the world, and we had a measuring component, so we could measure return on investment within the actual selection of what we were going to use as a benchmark. And we landed on trees for a couple of reasons. One, highly measurable, and we wanted a transaction model around it. So as individuals did things within the organization, earned badges, worked out and created wellness, benchmarks for themselves. If they moved the needle on any of the KPIs, everything that they did within the organization will now be translated not only into just points, but also into the emotional engagement of funding trees being planted around the world.
So really, the idea is to address task value. In other words, to create meaning. You might be dialing for dollars, a salesperson, or you might be doing some tough work, but gee, your effort is translating not only into planting trees, but employing people to plant them and maintain them in impoverished places. So I think what you're doing is using that as an emotional element to tie into the other elements of your platform, your engagement platform.
Absolutely. And I think the sort of third prong to that, the physical funding of trees is one thing, that planting is another. We're creating and helping people to move out of poverty and create real positive work. Our program to date, we funded, I think, in excess of 200 people in full-time employment in Madagascar, which is wonderful. We feel great about that. It's the tip of where we want to be, but it's a great starting point. But I think the third element is really the environment itself. If you bring the environment back, if you look at the Madagascar project specifically, we're planting millions of, again, trees that are going to create an ecosystem that currently doesn't exist. So 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, plants, native species move back. And what we're finding then is that circle of life comes back together again, where now, again, you've got much more sustainable climate, The climate in that area gets altered very quickly when you take trees away because water tables drop. And when water tables drop, what you're losing then is a lot of ecosystems, a lot of species disappear. Bring it all back, nature is really resounding in its ability to regenerate itself. And what we're seeing then is that turnaround of the ecosystem as well.
Well, that's again very unique. I haven't seen anybody else put the two together, E and S, the way you folks have. Dawn, I turn back to you because you really have more experience, but forget about your background. Now that you're in the engagement space, let's step back. You've been in the broader area of sustainability for many years. And I think you know that the people concept of sustainability really only started catching hold 2 years ago. But anytime before 2 years ago, sustainability meant environment. Where do you think we are, Dawn, in the overall, and this is where your name is so beautifully appropriate. Are we in the dawn of this? Sorry, couldn't resist. It's still very early stage, isn't it? Where companies are really beginning to strategically focus on people the way they have on manufacturing and lean and agile.
I think it was in the earlier stages before the pandemic hit. And I think that with the pandemic, that the S in ESG has been accelerated in terms of around people with the health crisis. And it goes to, the S, they've been talking about that at least in the last couple of years, where it's really moving from social to stakeholders. And the stakeholders are in the S, your customers, your employees, your supply chain. So I think there's this renewed emphasis on this area, and that the S of ESG is really becoming a focus. And it all links to culture, and it all links to the engagement field. So that's
Well,
what,
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So let me ask you this. So you guys are, attempting to, practice what you preach. How much do you expect to bake this into your solutions? Are you developing an ESG practice to help companies do what you're doing? And I know that your company itself, I follow you on LinkedIn. You seem to have a very active engagement strategy with your community, all your stakeholders. How do you think this is a business opportunity for Boost?
I think it is. We have really morphed from being a very product-centric company to more of a solution sale around employee engagement and really employee experience. So it's all about the experience for the employee. And that experience for us and what we're doing internally, which we are also having those same conversations with our customers, is around culture. It is around those KPIs, around what are you doing to invest in the community? What are you doing to invest in some of the societal issues that are going on right now? What are you doing as a company, and how are you measuring that? And I can tell you, I've had probably more conversations around culture and the S with the products and services that we offer with CEOs who have a renewed interest in this. It's just very interesting. And I do think it has accelerated because of the pandemic, because of employees being remote. I think that you're competing for talent now without geographical restrictions, because that whole myth has been busted about having to actually go into an office. You can work from anywhere. So I think I see a lot of uptick around the S.
Well, I'm going to get back to you on that because to prepare you, my question always is this just going to be another fad, another bright? Remember Total Rewards? Are any of you old enough to remember that big fad, late 90s, early 2000s? Nothing ever happened. Employee engagement. Oh, well, we can't use that term anymore. Have to use employee experience now. Maybe that'll solve the problem. When in fact, the real problem is that the CEO and the board and if she doesn't get it, okay, it ain't going to happen. So Brian, let me ask you, how do you see from the marketplace? You guys made an early shift in this. You've kind of indicated that it's something that you think you can help clients with. Could you be more specific? But also, where do you see this on the growth opportunity curve?
Well, Well, I think it's huge. I think it's, the shift we made was to realize that we were already talking about a big chunk of it. That was sort of relates to my comments earlier, right? And then you start looking at numbers, and depends where you pull them from. But any way you look at them, they're pretty impressive that millennials have $2.5 trillion worth of spending power. And according to studies, 95% said they would switch to a different brand that had a better cause. I mean, that alone is what has, I mean, for a long time it was Patagonia and a couple others that really played this card. Now you're seeing it everywhere, and for good reason. You talk about trees, Rob. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal just in the last few days about people who are offsetting their carbon, companies who are offsetting their carbon footprint by paying people who grow trees not to cut them down, at least for a period of time, and getting a carbon offset because every tree sequesters carbon out of the atmosphere. So pretty interesting stuff. But I think, and it comes down to dollars and cents. LePay, as a writer on the topic, said every time you spend money, you're casting a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. And I think that's really, I mean, it's probably been true forever. And much like casting a real vote, or much like planting a single tree, it doesn't do much. But it's more of your connection to the cause itself. And so the idea that the younger you go on the scale down to Gen Z and what's coming next, the more likely they are to believe in the cause of the company they buy from, pay up if necessary, but be more loyal to that brand, reduce switching or what have you. Any company paying attention to this, whether you're a manufacturer, retailer, what have you, is going to basically read those tea leaves and realize they need to be doing it. Now, if that's what sends them in the direction, then that's more dollars and cents in P&L. But once they get there and they realize the ancillary benefits, which is, again, stakeholder wise, it means more to their employees, it means more to the communities they're in. And I would just say, from an all-star perspective, from my company's perspective, we've always done this, and I think we can and will do more of it going forward. We have allowed our employees to have paid time off to go donate time to a charity. We celebrate all of the different charitable and social causes that we commit to as a company. We have a great wellness program. We have time during work where you can go work out, exercise. We pay for the nutritionist. We pay for the yoga instructor to come in and instruct you. And so we didn't start doing that last year or the year before. We started doing it 15 years ago. And I, Bruce, and I get your point about total rewards, but I don't think it died. I just think it was no longer the flavor of the month. But the idea that companies want to build a total recognition, total rewards solution. And by total, I mean, not even things that are, even with things that are not necessarily rewardable with points and prizes, that are rewardable with the fact that it feels good to go out and pick vegetables, which some of our employees do, from a farm that says, if you come pick them, we'll donate them to a food bank. We just need the labor to go do it. And I have employees that go out on my paid time, pick vegetables, wash them off, put them in baskets, and deliver them to a food bank. That's part of a total rewards program. And the reward is the feel-good moment that is, giving back to the society as a whole.
Well, and thank you for correcting me on total rewards, because no, the concept never went away. The buzzword changed. But you're the CEO of the company, you see. So you have the power to make that happen. And it only happens when the CEO is committed. Now, Rob, what's really interesting is that, and we're going to have another show on enterprise engagement technology coming up. It seems to me that technology can really be an incredible engine of ROI of ESG. And here's what I wanted to ask you about that. Besides on the east side, right? That's covered. You've got a tree for every point, easy to understand. And then when you explain the ecosystem of workers, jobs that are created to support it, and new environments. And, I'm old enough to have seen reclaimed land turn into beautiful, literally, I've seen it on an old farm I grew up on, went back to see it. An old devastated, overplanted area had become a beautiful forest. It can be done. So, but Rob, your technology also, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but human capital reporting is a major part of ESG for public companies. They don't just have a choice. And under the Biden administration's new SEC chair, it's pretty likely that they're going to be even more specific requirements than those that came out under a Republican administration on November 9th of last year. Your technology, or an employee engagement technology, this can actually provide companies with incredible data on the S part of their business, can't it? In terms of turnover, in terms of who's engaged. For instance, I would imagine you can track all activity with your technology based on the different worker classification or whatever demographics the company gives you. how can technology support the S part of engagement? And Brian, I believe you have a technology, so, and maybe you too, Dawn, so I'll get back to you as well on that. But Rob.
Yeah, so when you look at technology and what it can do, it's really limitless. And I think one of the sort of disconnects in our business, technically speaking, is the lack of automation within platforms today. There's so many other platforms out there, if you look at different sectors, where there's so much less work involved in running engagement programs or running a sales incentive program. These are fairly heavily managed programs, and technically the work hasn't changed all that dramatically over the years. Where I think Evergrow and our products have started to evolve, and I say starting because that's exactly where we are, we've created a much more highly automated process, meaning that we're encouraging workers to give recognition. We're encouraging managers to understand what survey tools actually say about them and their department. We're giving back data in a real-time prescriptive way. We've got 29 checkpoints right now that we've identified within the actions of employees and management that we audit on a regular basis. And we're using really very simple machine learning to allow us to gather data and then out of that create prescriptive direction for companies. We're a big believer in that these things shouldn't necessarily cascade up into a massively big complex dashboard, but really be simple, bite-sized directives to management, very simple bite-sized directives to employees. Because you've got to make it engaging and fun and simple. And people don't have time to play with massively big complex reports. We've proven that over the years because we built them and nobody ever looked at them all that much. But if I send you one very simple note that says, hey, Bruce, you've got somebody who's been away on sick leave for the last 3 days, you might want to check back in on that person. The amount of positive feedback you get just doing that for management, because they don't have time necessarily to see that activity, is really cool, because now we're putting them in touch with their employees. We're giving them a sense of what their well-being is all about, and they can be a real manager talking to them on a real level about something that's very personal and real to the employee. So we're trying to use technology to create connections that don't necessarily tie back to big flashy dashboards.
Well, that's great, and that makes total sense. Dawn, and from your perspective, more specifically, including technology, and Brian, I'm going to give you this question too, how can you help companies address the S of ESG, if that's indeed a place that you want to focus your business?
Yeah, it does come back to culture. It does come back to employees, and our technology. I mean, what we're seeing it being utilized for, as Rob was talking about in terms of management, not necessarily looking deeply at the reports, which they do because we have great reporting capability, but it's the whole peer-to-peer recognition and which parts of the organization are engaged. You see that on a daily basis. Who is being recognized for your company values? What departments are not recognizing anyone? Who's not participating? It's a real telltale sign across the organization about how much engagement you have from your employees, just in the peer-to-peer. Doesn't even have to be the points piece of it or redeeming for some type of a reward. It's just even that conversation back and forth. We've seen a lot of value, and we've seen the ability to, in our own organization, going back to managers who aren't participating and their teams aren't participating. And why aren't they? And they may not be engaged for some reason or another. So we've seen a lot of the use of that peer-to-peer recognition really as a standout and how engaged your employees are without having to have a reward.
So Brian, and make sure you're unmuted. Thank you, Brian. How do you intend to help clients address the S of ESG in a more strategic way, if you intend to do that?
Well, I mean, some of it's new school and technology, as Dawn and Rob were just talking about, and some of it's old school, right? So the new school, I mean, every time our sales team goes out and does a presentation to a client, every time I do a webinar, one of the keys to success, and one of the ones I really spend time on, is technology and the idea of embracing it, because there are people at all levels that tend to thumb their nose at it a little bit, or just one more thing I don't have time to learn how to do. But we have programs where people in the field are using wearable devices that measure whether they're lifting properly, whether they're twisting or turning, put themselves in a risky position. In companies where back injuries and similar types of strains and sprains are a big problem. And that technology, again, feeds into a point system and gives you real-time data on a screen where you can see how you're performing and your team's performing. And of course, there's all the Fitbit wearable technology that's out there now, but it's not just a question of tracking your steps. It's a question of using a platform where you put people into teams. We're going to walk the Appalachian Trail in a virtual world, and you and your teammates are going to be able to see at any given time along the way where you are relative to your coworkers, and what's a good water cooler type fun moment to talk about how many steps you have and which state you're in and all that fun stuff. And this isn't even whiz bang. The AI stuff that Rob sort of alluded to earlier can really let you break down data and cross-pollinate information about your safety recognition reward program with turnover. Whereas a lot of the safety guys don't even think about that, but HR really wants to know if the reduction in turnover is coming from somewhere. Where is that? And it might be because you just ramped up greatly the amount of employee manager involvement, recognition, right? People don't leave jobs, they leave managers. Well, if you help your managers become better at recognizing and rewarding somebody, or if you help your employees, again, peer-to-peer program, and back to what we do internally, all of our employees have points on every given month in their giving account, and they can give them to any other employee in the company, unfettered, not as judged by somebody else, for demonstrating one of our core values: giving extra effort, great customer service, mentoring a new employee, right? Giving inspiration is one of the ones we have. So employee-to-employee recognition. We also have the ability to nominate people. So I'm sort of mixing a bunch of things together, but using technology and using that connectivity to help people make a friend on the job and enjoy their relationship with their manager. These are the reasons they're going to stick around as much as anything. And then just to come back to the dirt world side, something that's been out there forever is don't let a good message go unnoticed, right? So these platforms that we have, one of my customers came to me, this stuck out, this is 15 years ago, and said, when I showed them how much traffic we were getting to the rewards program, it was 20 times what they were getting to their intranet site. Now, their intranet site has their 401k and their health benefits and all some really, really important stuff. And most people just ignore it and go to it once in a while when they need to. We were getting 20x to the rewards program side. And so we made the path to the rewards program through the intranet. And we do that with most programs now through a single sign-on. But the point is, we get the eyeballs and we get their attention. And while I have their attention, we want to make sure that we're crowing about corporate accomplishments, right? Coming back to, and I'll get off this in a second, but Jeff Bezos famously said, your margin is my opportunity. Well, I'm looking at it now as your ESG is my opportunity. And so if your company is winning awards for sustainability and for best places for women to work and most innovative places, or anything good news, right? You want to get that out there and you want your employees to see it. And you'd be amazed at how many large organizations had really good things happen. And if you asked the entire workforce, only 5% would even know that it happened. So using these tools that we have that draw the attention to show them how successful their company's being in ways they probably have never noticed before, and getting that message out because we have a captive audience is another win-win opportunity within the platform.
And that leads me to thank you, to what I wanted to talk to Rob about. And the boring part, I'm sorry, but a big part of the S and the ESG is reporting. It is, because you can't make claims without substantiating them. And, investors have a right to know. I'm a huge libertarian in the sense that as long as it's legal, go for it, right? You have that right. But as an investor, if I believe that ESG is material, or if I'm an employee and I want to, as many millennials do, as I think Dawn pointed out, or one of you pointed out, they're going to gravitate more toward companies that are ESG oriented because of what you said, task value. So Rob, isn't one of the roles of technology, and I would think the other colleagues who have technology would say the same, is that you can be a really big source of valuable data for human capital reporting, either internal or external, right? Because it would seem to me that turnover, who's coming in and out of the program. If you've given the demographics, the demographics. So you could actually run reports. Well, how do different parts of my audience feel about the company? How much are they engaged in the rewards and recognition program, as I think, Brian, you said. Now, I know companies in the past have not been asking for a lot of this, but my question is, theoretically, companies can get whatever. This is a question.
Mm-hmm.
you can be a major source of information on us, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really encompasses a great number of variables, obviously. But the interesting part is, we can create culture engagement scoring, and that has become pretty critical. If we're, part of a private equity firm, and the private equity firm has recently mandated that all the portfolio partners must go through an engagement, 360 review. Fascinating process. We've been through them many times because we're in the industry, but it was the most interesting one of all because it had a much different perspective. It was more about what you're talking about. It's about the investor community driving the fact that ESG is so critical to going forward when they look at investments. And, I've heard this multiple times in the last few months around how investor communities are now looking at ESG and making it a key component in their decision as to how and where they invest. So when you see that happening, that of course is going to ripple through everything, and that will drive a lot of corporate endorsement for creating solidly measurable ESG metrics. And we are a great source for that data because we can definitely do that. We can create culture scores, monitor engagement on a monthly, weekly basis. We can show them all kinds of really interesting information that supports how this company is doing in building employee engagement. How are they managing diversity? How are they managing workforce? What's attrition look like? All those metrics are easily captured within our programs. And that really takes you more down a human capital management path than necessarily singularly employee engagement. And I think HCM is the broader term right now where we really play as organizations.
Well, you can help with all stakeholders, and that's what's critical. And a lot of people, when they define human capital, they just employ it. No, it's not just employees. I'm sorry. It's customers, it's supply chain, it's communities, and in some cases, government regulators. And that's just the reality. Dawn, and Brian, get ready. You're going to be last. But Dawn, you brought up something that's very interesting, even in the rewards side of the business. It's apparently, are you saying the brands that are more associated with ESG are actually clients are asking about it? And that, are you seeing more emphasis of that on the reward side as well?
Um, yes, because we're selling when we're selling to a client, we're selling the whole engagement journey. So it may be a rewards and recognition program as part of that. It may be an e-commerce store. It may be branded merchandise. So we're not selling independent pieces. So in some of these, in our RFPs, as well as in our presentations, we're including this because they're asking mostly in the supply chain around your anti-human trafficking and what you're doing there, of which we have a zero tolerance policy. I've been very involved in anti-human trafficking for a number of years. Been asking about that. They're also asking about environmental, the E, in terms of we have actually, with some of our clients, have required us to publish our KPIs every year on sustainability as part of retaining their business. And that was a rewards and recognition client. So we have seen where clients are asking us for it, whatever their KPI is, particularly these larger organizations, whatever their KPIs are, they are rolling down to their partners.
And what you've also said is it's not necessarily for public companies. This applies to, because you're not a public company.
We're not a public company. And I just wanted to go back to something that Rob said just about talking about the investor community and metrics. It's about risk mitigation.
Yeah.
And you really have to look at the E, the S, and the G in terms of mitigating your risk, where you're going to invest. Financial obviously is the key, particularly when you're owned by private equity. Financial is definitely a key metric, but you have to look at the ESG to really understand where your risks are in investing in a company.
That's a great point. Brian, you and I'm older than you, but we've seen a lot, and a lot of these buzzwords have come and gone. Total quality management, once it came, it never left. It became it endured, right? That's one thing, you haven't heard that go away. It endured because it basically worked. Is this a fad, or do you think this is the future?
No, I think this one's here to stay. It'll morph like everything else morphs, and other things might push it off the front page at times, but it's gonna, much like we talked about total rewards or total quality management, or lean, or any other metrics of which to try to measure your organization and see if you're doing it right and if there's a better way. This one's here to stay, and I think its trajectory for at least the next 5 years, it's going to put it on the front page for a long time. There was a study that said the question is, I expect CEOs to publicly speak out about one or more of the following social issues, and it's pandemic and societal issues and what have you, the stuff you'd imagine. And 86% of people said yes. I expect publicly, and a large publicly traded company CEOs to speak out, and I guarantee that wouldn't be any different for large privately held companies as well, or just companies. Period. Larry Fink said profits are in no way inconsistent with purpose. In fact, profits and purpose are inextricably linked. You heard what Brian Moynihan said, obviously coming out of Davos. So, or if not, look it up. But I mean, it's an EY and all these other companies. This is not, if they wouldn't be giving it this amount of lip service if that's what was going on here. This is the new normal. I've heard people in my life that lament the whole nanny state thing, right? I mean, everything from why should corporate America have to be the conduit to health insurance, right? I've heard people lament that fact and all the different regulations, rules, and taxes, and what have you. But it is what it is. You can shout at the rain all you want. It's a positive. It's a win-win-win-win. Probably 4 different ways depending on how you look at it. And there's no way CEOs are going to ignore this, and there's no way it's just going to wave away over a period of time. I don't think the millennials and Gen Z and what comes after that are going to somehow morph into their grandfather's generation of I'm just happy to have a job and I'll stay there for 40 years. And it's so liquid, right? The job market now, the same tools we use, LinkedIn, Indeed, and Glassdoor and what have you, these tools that are out there that can benefit us can lay us to waste as well if we're getting terrible reviews on Glassdoor, if nobody wants to come work for us, right? And so you can't help but it's the air we breathe now. You're going to have to respond to it, and I can't see how it could possibly go away and not be here to stay.
So quickly, Rob, as we draw to a close, yes, no, do you agree? Fad, or do you really think this is here to stay?
Well, I mean, it's here to stay. It's, as Brian said, definitely will morph into other things, but it's definitely here to stay.
Well, folks, thank you very much. Rob Purdy, President and CEO and founder, I should say, of CarltoneOne and Evergrow. Brian Galonek, CEO of All Star Incentive Marketing. Dawn Conway, CEO of Boost Engagement. Thanks so much for this. And folks, just a quick recap summary. Apparently, these folks think that this whole concept of ESG is here to stay. They do see a direct relationship between this and engagement. Their technologies and their applications can help companies run their business this way. No, it's not just corporate social responsibility and feeling good. It's actually driven by business, and it actually affects the types of products that are going to be redeemed or featured in different programs. And no, it doesn't look like this is a fad, according to our guests. So thanks so much once again for your participation. And we'll see you on another EEA show.